Alright, so today we're going to keep going with some more Python, and we're going to get you ready to do your first Python assignment. So what you're going to do from our homepage, wmci.compsci.ca, go to CS20 Resources, and head to the textbook. And in the textbook, I want you to scroll down and get to this Python Getting Started section. Today, the ones we're going to look at are conditionals and beginning the input-output assignment. So start by going to conditionals. And I'm going to talk you through the ideas of both of these sections, and then you'll be able to start working on your assignment. So the first part is a quick reminder that when you use a single equal sign, that means we're assigning or setting a value. When we use two equal signs, we're comparing a value. So for example, if you were to take a look at this code right here, and right now you might want to pause the video and think about what this might do when we hit run. So I'll wait for a moment. Okay, so if you've thought this one through, hopefully what you're seeing is that in line number 1, we are assigning the variable number to have the value of 20 as an integer. In line number 2, we're saying let's reassign the variable number to now equal whatever it used to be, which is 20 plus 10. Since both of those are integers, then the plus sign means it's going to add. So it's going to be 20 plus 10, which is 30. So now our number has a value of 30. In line 4, we're asking if number equals 10. And because there's two equal signs, we're not setting its value to 10, we're checking its value. So here, since it's 30, this is not true. So we don't do what's indented here. Then we check to see is it 20. Since the answer is still not true, it's set to 30, we don't do what's here. And finally, we ask in line number 10, is this thing equal to 30? Because there's two equal signs, we're checking. The answer is yes, it is. So now we're going to print this. So when we run it, we're going to get the numbers assigned a value of 30. All right, so let's do something similar. Take a look at this one. I'll pause for a minute while you figure it out. So here, we set the variable age to equal the integer 15. We set the variable name to equal the string Zoe. And now we ask if age double equals 15. So again, double equal means that I'm checking the value. Since it does equal that, we've assigned it the value of 15 there. That means we're going to run this code right here inside that if statement. So when we run it, we get almost old enough to drive on your own. If we were to change this value to be like a 16, for example, then this if statement would be false, which means that we would execute whatever's inside the else, which would be, in this case, either older or younger than 15. If we take a look at this one, it's very similar. This time, though, I've included an elif. So now we have if the age is 15, elif name is Zoe, and else older or younger than 15. So I'll pause for a second and let you think this through. Essentially, what you're going to do here is you're going to think about, well, first off, I assign the value of age to be 15, assign the value of name to be Zoe, then I ask if age is 15, and again, double equals means I'm checking. So since it does, I'm going to execute this. So the real question is, do I also execute this one here because name is Zoe? And the answer is you don't. And the reason is that this is an elif. An elif means when you have an if, elif, else. So there's 3 different possible branches here. Only one of those can occur. So it will never be that you have an if, elif, else, and more than one of those branches happens. It's only ever going to be one. So even if we change the age to be 16, now when we ask this question, that would be false because it's not 15, it's 16 now. So then we'd ask, is the name Zoe? And we'd say, yep, it is, okay. Then I'm going to print, hi Zoe, good to see you, and I don't run the else. The only time I'd run the else is if I switched this to some other name, in which case now this would be false, this one is also false, so now I'm going to execute the else. All right. In another one, in this case, again, take a look at that, pause the video if you want, and see if you can confirm what's going to happen on this one. It's nearly the exact same thing. There's one small difference, and that is this line number 11 right here. So now, if we have age is 15, we have name is Zoe, the first thing I do is I set name, and I check name, and I say with double equals, that means I'm checking its value. So does the name equal Eli? Well, it doesn't. We set it to Zoe. So that means this one is not going to happen. Then I check elif, the age is 16. Well, it's not. It's 15. So I don't do this. That means the else is going to trigger. So we're going to get it's been a while. But because line 11 is outside of that if elif else, this one's going to happen no matter what. So what I'm going to get is both it's been a while as well as I'm a little sleepy. So it should look like this. And if you were to change these, let's say that that was a 16, now we would, in the if elif else branches, we would trigger this branch because age is 16 and name is not Eli. So now I'd get you can drive as well as I'm a little sleepy. Okay, so all that hopefully clarifies a few things that we've been talking about in class. A couple other big ideas that I want you to realize here is just a reminder about one of our primitive data types, and that's Booleans. Remember that when you type in a Boolean, it's going to have to be capitalized. So it's either capital T true or capital F false, right? And they do not have quotes around them. That's a different thing than it would be a string. So you don't put quotes around a Boolean. So, for example, here if I were to print out what is the type of true, well, that one is going to be a Boolean. But if I print the type of the quotes around true, that one's going to be a string. So that's why that happens. So if you want it to be a Boolean, no quotes. All right. Other things that you can do, we've been using these double equals to check. So for example, this is printing the question, does 5 equal 5? And the answer would be true. This one would print the question, does 5 equal 6? And the answer would be false. So every time we ask a question, the result will be a Boolean, either true or false. Now, we've seen a few of these. We've used greater than, we've used less than, used greater than or equal to, used less than or equal to. The one thing that we haven't taken a look at is this one right here. So if you want to ask, does something not equal something else, you put an exclamation mark, then an equal sign, and that means does not equal. So for example, here if I said 5 does not equal 5, the answer to that is going to be false because 5 does equal 5, right? Now there is the not keyword as well, which we learned in Reborg, so you should be familiar with it, I hope. But the idea here is whatever the answer is to this, so this will turn into a Boolean, so it's the same as that, so this part here would be a false, and then the not is going to flip it. So now instead of it being false, that becomes true. So that's why this happened here. All right, so what you should do right now, pause this video, and I want you to take some time, and I want you to practice this question right here, the add, subtract two numbers. Basically what's going to happen is you're going to write some code, and what it should do is when you run your code, and you can do this, I suppose, either in Thonny or inside the textbook here, but if you do it in the textbook, just hit download at the end so you can keep a copy of your code. And if you do it in Thonny, you'll keep a copy anyway, as you'll be saving it. But what should happen is when you run the code, ask the user, do you want to add or subtract? Then when they take in, then at that point you say, okay, what's the first number? Great. What's the second number? Okay. And then if they said add them together. If they said subtract the two. Either way, print the result. Okay. So try that question. Then also try this area calculator here. Okay. So do that. Pause the video. Try both of those. Once you've got both of those done, resume this video and I will continue on with the tutorial for today. So after you finish those off, what we're going to do is we're just going to hit the next section here. So I'll go forward, and really what we're going to do is try a couple more what does this program do, and then I'll intro your first Python assignment that you're going to hand in to me. So the what does this program do questions, first off take a look at this one. So once again, pause the video and see if you can think through what's going to happen on this. Okay, so the double equal sign, that means that I'm checking, does the left side equal the right side? So here, does 16 equal 16? Well, it actually doesn't quite, because on the left-hand side, this one is an integer, and on the right hand side that one's a string. So they're not quite the same. So when I run this, I'm going to get false. So you could, of course, either convert the right hand side to be an integer by removing those quotes, in which case you'd get true, or you could convert them both into quotes like this and make them both strings, and then you get true as well. Okay. On this one, I'd like you to try this one. So in the textbook yourself, see if you can figure out what the error is going to be so you can run it, and then see if you can sort out what's happening. So just pause the video and give that a try. All right, the reason that I'm doing this one is that it's one of the most common errors I see as people get started in Python. So for example, let's say that I ran this and I typed in Sarah and hit OK. I'm going to get this error right here that says name error, name Sarah is not defined on line 2. So what have I done wrong? Well, although I did type in Sarah when we took in this input, here when I ask does name double equal Sarah, Python looks for a variable called Sarah because I don't have this thing enclosed in quotes. If I'm trying to ask does it equal the string Sarah, I would need to have it in quotes like this. Remember that every time you take input from the user, it's going to come back as a string, so that means that this should now work. So let's give it a try. If I run it again, put in Sarah, now I'd get, hi Sarah, good to see you. Excellent. So that seems to work. Okay. And one last one, if you take a look at this, I'm going to have you pause the video and I want you to try to type the number, let's say 12. So you're going to put in 12. So pause the video, try it, see if you can figure out why it's doing what it's doing, then resume. Okay, so if I type in 12, you'll notice that what I actually get is not the 24 that you probably expected, but rather I get 1212. So what's going on here? Well, the answer is that number right now is assigned whatever you typed in, and remember that input is always going to give me a string, so that means that I'm getting the string 12 in quotes. So it turns out that just like addition, if you add two strings together, that's going to join them together or concatenate them, not add. And if you take a string like 1, 2 in quotes, essentially what this is doing is 1, 2 like that times 2. This is actually just saying I want to write this string 2 times. So if I changed that to be a 3, and I'll just put this back to number now so you can see what happens, but let's say that that was times 3 and I put in 1, 2 again, now what I'd get is 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So 3 different times I get 1, 2. So the multiplication symbol, if the thing on the left is a string, this just means repeat it some number of times. Okay, so the point of all that is that you really have to be careful with your data types. So if you're taking input from the user, it's always going to return you a string. If you want to do math to it, so let's say back up here that we wanted it to actually double the value, what I would need to do is I would need to say something like number equals the integer version of number. So I'm saying, first off, take input from the user, assign it to the variable number. Now here what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, let's reassign number to be whatever the integer version of number is. So if I convert number into an integer. Now if I did that, and I'll just put this back to times 2, now if I run this and put in a 1, 2, now what I'll get is a 24, because now the multiplication symbol actually does multiply since this is an integer. Okay, so if it's an integer or a float, then this would work as multiplication. And just to prove that to you, if we change this to a float and try it again with 1, 2, what we're going to get is the floating point version of that, which is just 24.0. All right, so if you want to convert from one data type to another, you're going to use int and then whatever you want to convert inside there. Or you're going to use float if you want to convert it into a float, which is a number with a decimal. And finally, if you want to convert it into a string, use str. Okay, so I think now you've seen enough and practiced enough that you should be able to do your very first assignment inside of Python. So it's going to be a Python program that's going to convert from degrees Fahrenheit to Celsius, as well as the other way around, from Fahrenheit to Celsius and from Celsius to Fahrenheit. Okay, so the very first thing you need to do is you're going to ask the user which conversion they want to do. So either F to C or C to F, and then get the user to type in some value and convert that thing into the appropriate thing. All right, so there's a few points that I want to make here since it's your very first Python assignment. So to begin with, make sure that you have a comment header at the top of your code. Looks something like this, right? Where you say, what is the point of the assignment? What's your name? When did you write this? And then you write your code underneath there. And additionally, and I'll just open up Canvas here and show you what I'm talking about. So you'll find this under temperature conversion inside of Python. So if you take a look at temperature conversion, you'll see the same details that I put in the textbook there. But there's a couple things I'd like to point out inside of here. First off, remember, input's always going to give you back a string, and you're going to need to have it as a number in order to do some conversion. So think about the fact that you'll probably have to change the data type like we were just practicing. And finally, I've included some ideas for extra for experts. So what the extra for experts are, let me just scroll down and show you the rubric here. So the rubric for all of your Python code is going to be, first off, functionality. Does it work the way it should? And that's going to be 3 of the possible marks. Additionally, you need to have documentation. So you need to have your comment header like we just talked about. And you also need to have a comment at the top of each chunk of code. So for example, taking user input, converting the data types, performing conversion, etc. Those type of comments. Finally, readability. What that is did you choose good variable names? And did you space out your code properly? So it's not just one big wall of text, but in between chunks, did you put a blank line to make it easier for others to read? And finally, efficiency. That one for these first assignments is going to be kind of a gimme. There's not much you can do to increase efficiency, so you should be good. But later on in the course, what I'm looking for there is, did your code take like 100 lines when it could have been 10? If that was the case, you'd lose marks on efficiency. So, not using a loop when you could have, for example. All right, and lastly is this wow me factor. So the wow me factor really is, did you try and succeed on the extra for experts, or did you do something that takes it above and beyond the basics that I asked for? So for this assignment, what you're going to do for extra for experts to get those final 10 marks, so to go beyond the maximum of 90, is you could add the ability to convert to and from Kelvin as well. So there'd actually be 6 conversions then. You could go from either Celsius, Fahrenheit, or Kelvin into either Celsius, Fahrenheit, or Kelvin, right? And the last one for the extra for experts is try to foolproof your input here, so that what happens is, let's say that I was looking for a temperature and you typed in the word Frank instead of 15. There's a way to make sure that your code doesn't crash, and the key is to Google the phrase try and accept in Python, and you'll be able to sort that out. All right, so best of luck, everybody, and let me know if you're having any issues with the assignment.